All right, first I just wanted, can you guys hear me okay? I'm usually pretty loud. Uh, First I wanted to make sure I thanked the Motor Neuron Disease Association, the Irish Motor Neuron Disease Association, and the National Alliance for organizing this meeting and inviting me to speak. And before I talk about anything, I'm going to show you data from people with ALS. So first I want to thank them. About 380 people with ALS have participated in this. It's also kind of hard to follow. The Prize for Life presentation, Shay's over here, came all the way in from Israel. It's amazing what you've done with the mobile analyzer. The data coming out of that is amazing. It just truly is. I've seen it on the back end. I encourage you to talk to Shay and his team about it. The Pulse work you just heard out of France is an incredible project. I'm really kind of making a pitch here to everybody to get these types of systems in your countries. That's because precision medicine is here. It's in our field. It's not going to go anywhere. In fact, it's just going to grow. So you need to know about it. If you're running an ALS M&D organization, you need to know what we're talking about and how you're going to think about potentially including this in your research strategy in the future. Doesn't have to be today, but sometime in the next 10 years, if you're funding clinical research, this is a type of research that you're very likely going to get pressure from your board and the people you serve, people with ALS, to fund. I would just make a small comment that some of these things are kind of looked at as just science programs. They may not be. If you're in charge of an organization that actually provides direct care to people with ALS or does public policy on behalf of people with ALS, these programs can augment, they can supplement, or they could replace patient registries. If you own the data in your organization, you may be able to get every person with ALS registered in your country. You know, in the US, we have about 30,000 people with ALS at most. That's a lot of people to track down. Some other countries, it's certainly smaller. So when we talk about these programs, think about it differently. It's not just science. How can it help you with your patients? Also, as you saw in the Mobile Analyzer app and in the Pulse program, there's a lot of information that's collected about how the person is doing with their disease. If you're responsible for determining whether or not a person ought to access an assistive communication device, go on a BiPAP, get some help for dementia, you're going to start tracking these things in these programs, and it may help you and your team actually devise plans earlier for the patients that you're trying to serve. And of course, these systems can help track clinical enrollment, track what supplements people are using, what medications people are using as well, which may help you advocate at the public policy level for some coverage around those things. So the number one fact, I'm going to try to go quick here, is that there are no effective treatments for ALS. And I say that knowing also well that there is a drug called Rileatech. It does provide modest benefit, 3 to 6 months. We all know that. It's not a home run. It doesn't stop the disease. That's why I say there are no effective treatments for ALS, and I will round back to this at the end. Fact two, there are still poorly validated drugs that are going to the clinic. You know, that's up to us in the lab to put better drugs forward. And we're seeing better drugs go into the clinic, but still we have poorly validated drugs going forward. One of the reasons that the FEC1 exists is that we don't have truly objective measures of disease progression. The ALS-FRS score is a uniquely challenging tool to use in a clinical trial setting. It can take hundreds of people over a year or more to reach a statistically significant endpoint with that. ALS kills within 36, 48, 56 months. We have to find objective measures that allow us to do clinical research with fewer patients and quicker. And these are the types of things that Pulse, the Mobile Analyzer app, and what I'm going to talk to you about may help us solve so that we can change that fact one to there actually being effective treatments for ALS. So I'm going to focus on fact three here. This is our precision medicine program at the Institute. It is a full 30x coverage genome done on the same platform that my friends at Project Mine are using, the same Illumina platform. So the same type of data, full biomarker work, blood, CSF, et cetera, all running through proteomics, all the different omics. We're not going to run through them all. ALS-FRS score is self-reported like the other systems. Patient fibroblasts are pulled off the person for stem cell development down the road. We collect family histories, medical histories, lifestyle, where did you live, what did you do for a job, did you ever hit your head? All those things are collected. I'm going to focus today quickly on accelerometer data and voice sampling because these are things that you're going to start hearing a lot about in your science meetings. And you're going to hear a really great, actually, deep conversation on science tomorrow. Do not skip out on it. Dr. David Taylor, my colleague from ALS Canada, is going to give a great talk. So make sure you're here for that half hour. Most importantly in our program, to brag a little bit, we treat the patient with the person with ALS as a research partner. They're not participants. All of the data they put into the program, they can access online at any point, anywhere in the world. It's their data. So to Colleen's question, who owns the data? Yeah, they sign and we own the data, but they have access to every single piece of data themselves. And they can, as you heard from our friends from Israel, then show that data if they want to their clinician to help them actually treat their own disease. This is a revolutionary change in how science is happening. So what does the accelerometer work? I have one in my hand. This device is really kind of ugly. It looks like maybe you're being tracked out of prison. It wasn't chosen to be easy like the smartphone. You know, the smartphone is an incredible invention, but that's not an FDA-approved tool to run clinical trials. This is. If this is proven to actually measure disease better in some way than ALS-FRS, I don't have to convince the FDA that this is a tool that they will approve. They've already approved it. Somebody just has to do the math to figure out if we can use this in ALS. We're probably a year away from figuring that out. And I'll show you a little bit of how we line this up. In ALS-FRS, there are 4 questions that basically ask you questions about how your handwriting is, how you're cutting your food, dressing and hygiene, turning in bed. These are questions of mobility. This thing measures those same types of things. But the problem is that there's spaces in between all of these answers in the ALS-FRS. So we want to get much, much more sensitive. So what does the data look like? Very quickly here. These are real patient data. Participant 153, you can see quickly, is blue and a red line. You see they overlap really nicely. That tells us that in one patient over 3 different time points, this is about 12 months, this measures in the same way that they're reporting their ALS-FRS. The slope of change is the same. Not all that surprising. Exciting that maybe it tells us that it's measuring the same thing. We look at another patient, patient 62, a similar amount of time, there's divergence between these 2 lines. So what do we learn from this? Well, a couple of things that we look at when we look at this data is the velocity. That's what you're seeing here on the left, kind of how quickly people are moving, the total distance that a person is traveling, you know, to go up and down with their arm, and I can walk you guys through the actual exercises later. It's about 3 meters. You can see it kind of decreases later on, so maybe they're traveling less distance in a shorter amount of time. This is the other person's data. You can see they start off with lots of movement, and then it slows down. And in fact, the distance that they travel shortens, but they're doing more smaller repetitions. What have we learned from this? And I know I'm going through this kind of quickly, is, well, what if that green line or that blue line is the control group and the red line is the treatment group? We may be throwing out drugs in clinical trials because of the ALS-FRS score that may be impacting something that is important to a person with ALS. If I can move my arm up and down a lot more, maybe I can drink coffee. Maybe I can hug my kid. Those are things that matter to a person with ALS. And we're not necessarily capturing those spaces in between on the ALS-FRS score. This is actually a database that's been partnered with Denali Therapeutics, a pharmaceutical company out of the Bay Area in Massachusetts. We're starting to analyze this data. It does look like this may pan out as a tool to not replace, but augment what we do in clinical trials in the future. The other thing we're looking at that I'll talk about today, there are about 10 different points, is voice sampling. Voice sampling in this case is a phrase called "I owe you a yo-yo today." You say it 5 times in a normal cadence. You can all actually, at the end of the day, call a phone number and record your saying and actually help us in research as part of a control group. This, again, measures up to things that are in the ALS-FRS score. For example, the question about speech. I was telling this story to somebody the other day. I live in Boston. You know, we kind of are known for our really terrible accents over in the US. So, you know, if I was answering, if I didn't know what the ALS-FRS score was, and you just asked me fill out one of these bubbles, which one best describes my speech, you know what, I'd probably be honest and say detectable speech disturbance, or maybe unintelligible intelligible with repeating, because we got kind of some thick accents. So when you literally interpret this stuff to run a clinical trial, it can be really challenging. So this speech data has actually all been transferred. There are about 6,500 recordings. It's all been transferred already to Google. They're running their fantastic algorithms through this data to try to figure out if there is a way to actually measure differences in how people's speech change throughout their disease. And I say that, we all know that happens. The problem with the ALS-FRS score is that it takes us 12 months to prove it. What if we could prove it in 3 months? What if we could prove it in 5 months? we may speed up clinical trials, which will allow us to run through lots of the good ideas that are coming out of everybody's lab quicker and change that fact one of no effective treatment to actually a cure. So that's the phone number. You obviously have to call the country code to do that. You can call in and record your "I owe you a yo-yo" phrase, say it 5 times, and you will help us advance ALS research. Like I said, all this data has been transferred to Google. This is an ongoing project. There are about 380 people enrolled right now. We have IRB approval to enroll a maximum of 650 people. I think we'll reach that point next year. I ought to note that there's at least one person of ALS in this program from every state in the United States, all 50 states, but there are actually 9 countries that have at least one. Most of them have 5 or 6 people enrolled in this program, so this really is a global effort. So when we start to think about solving the ALS problem in precision medicine in big data ways, it's not about picking one of these boxes. It's about putting them all together. We don't know if it's going to be a combination of voice sampling and genetics that is going to allow us to identify those subtypes of this disease to start to develop treatments for the right patient at the right time. You got to collect all the data and let the data drive you. So like I said when I started, I wanted to talk about this today, hopefully at a high level so that you're aware of the concepts of precision medicine. It's going to come to your country. Yes, the ALS Therapy Development Institute went first. We're very proud to have innovated this research in the world. Many other groups, you heard a couple of them talk about it today. A couple others that are not here to talk about it today are Answer ALS and ALS Act, which are located in the United States, but also have collaborators worldwide. You need to know about this and think about how to work it into your research strategy. I added this slide at the last minute, Sarah, and I know I'm talking quickly, but I'll slow down here because this is probably the most important thing and most proud thing I can say today. I have been in this field for 12 and a half years. I have never been more hopeful that I am going to see not just treatments, but a cure for ALS in my lifetime. That is going to happen. We get hope of that because of some of the drugs that a couple of companies in the room are representing, and a couple in the room aren't here. Whether it be Radicate, or should it come to the US, Radicava, or tirasemtiv, or mistibinib, or our own drug, AT-1501. All these drugs are very exciting. A couple of them have already been approved to treat this disease outside of my own country. Some of them are starting to move forward in the United States. This didn't exist when I started in this field 12 and a half years ago. This is an incredibly hopeful time, and all of the patients, all the researchers, all the organizations involved in these programs and the others should be congratulated. And finally, just one small other comment about technology. You're going to hear a little bit more about it. I want to just thank, again, Prize for Life and Python Technologies. John Costello, you guys are going to, if you come to the APF on Tuesday, you're going to hear about an incredible program that he's doing around speech. Get involved in that. My friend at home is a guy with ALS. His name is Steve Saling, and he says, technology is the cure until we get one. So know about technology, know how to use it to solve the problems that we're all facing in each one of our jobs. So thank you to all the patients that are involved in this program. You can fully enroll right now. If you have patients in your own country, they don't have to travel to Boston. Go to als.net. You'll see a click right there on precision medicine right on the homepage. And I should give credit that the program was designed by Dr. Perrin and Dr. Vieira at the ALS Therapy Development Institute, and all the data here I stole from Dr. Vieira. So I will stop there, and if there is any time for a question, I'm totally happy to take it. Or find me later. If anybody wants to actually see what the patient sees on their end, I have permission from one of the patients in the program to actually show you his portal. You can see exactly what he sees and start thinking about how this may be able to help you in your own jobs. Thank you.
We do have time for questions.
We're not.
Not asking questions.
They're ready for cocktails.
Oh, sure.
Corey.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Listening to all this presentation from Pulse and from the app and this, did you know before starting that you were all working on things that might collaborate together?
I mean, I think that we were all probably a bit of aware of it. There's a big difference between all these programs. So doing it together was going to be a challenge. Sharing data across the countries, especially genetic data, for example, is a real challenge. So sometimes it makes sense to collaborate at the gates. Sometimes it makes sense to kind of unify the data later. We've talked with Prize for Life a couple of times about unifying the data down the road. But yeah, I mean, we did
We
all
all need this.
And these, and I'll comment just one other thing, that this is not the end of it. This is not a perfect program. Somebody in this room has a researcher that you're funding right now that is going to come up with a research program 10 times better than this. This is just a good start at looking at precision medicine in ALS.
Yeah. Congratulations on your presentation. We were wondering about foreign participants outside the US and the requirements for that.
There's a, similar to the pulse requirement, you have to be diagnosed with ALS. You have to be able to give informed consent. And I would add in this program, it's probably important to say that you have to be able to either speak or have an interpreter speak English. But otherwise, it's entirely available online. You don't have to travel anyplace. So if 100 patients from your country wanted to use this program to try to track their disease, that's something that you could use it for.
They just can go online and register.
You can, and we start with kind of what we call a PMP light version, where we start tracking voice and accelerometer and patient histories, et cetera, and then we can build on that to look at genetics and omics and those types of things.
How do you verify their actual diagnosis? I mean, from someone from abroad.
Well,
Do
there's
they have to send something, or
It's a really good question. Oftentimes, if we suspect that, we will ask for evidence. You can pretty much tell whether or not somebody has ALS after you interview them over the phone or via email a couple of times. It's a hard disease to kind of game. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.